Debbie has been on the run for a new job for a while now. She has been staying up from dusk till dawn on her PC, surfing the internet to get first-hand information about any vacancy. Things, no doubt, have been tough for Debbie ever since she lost her loving husband. Debbie's late husband was a military man. He was in the U.S. Army for years. He slightly lost his life in war after his daughter was born. Debbie became a widow and a single mother simultaneously. Her family was the only one she could fall upon, but unfortunately they neglected her after the death of her husband. According to them, they weren't ready to help because they had warned Debbie before the husband's death not to get married to him because of his profession. They didn't want Debbie to get married to a soldier because, in their opinion, soldiers are liable to die young. So, for this reason, they all deserted Debbie for being disobedient and following her wish only. Debbie had to cater to herself and her new baby girl. In this quest, she enrolled in 2 part-time jobs. She did one from dusk till noon and resumed the other from afternoon till dusk. That was the work pattern for Debbie for years. That was how she could provide the basic things her kid needed. She was a great mother. Regardless of her tight schedule, she ensured to provide time for her baby girl, Victoria. She dropped her off in the morning and picked her up in the evening. They lived in a mini apartment, and she had a smooth relationship with her immediate neighbors. When Victoria clocked 3, Debbie thought it was wise to enroll her in a nursery school. While she had the bump of Victoria and her husband was still alive, they often talked about how they would raise their kids. Debbie's husband assured her that his kids would get the best treatment any parent would offer, starting from their introductory level to adulthood, irrespective of what it would cost him. And even after her husband's death, Debbie promised to fulfill his promises as that was the least she could do in his respect. After all, that was what he wanted for his kid. Debbie enrolled baby Victoria in the best school in the city. Although expensive, she was ready to bet on it with her life savings. It wasn't too difficult to keep up with it at first, since she had planned well and saved for a day. However, she could only go for a short while. Her savings got exhausted within 2 terms. She was living a big man lifestyle for her kid. She thought of calling it to quit at some point, but her husband's purpose wouldn't let her. She decided that instead of giving her daughter a low-standard education, it would be better to increase her income to balance the high standards she envisaged for Victoria. Fortunately, Debbie was able to secure a job with a big firm. It was more like a contract that was to last for 2 years. It was a big one for her and a breakthrough that came at the best time. To top it all off, she was allowed to work from home. This allowed her to spend more time with her baby girl after school hours than before. Her job wasn't a hectic or tasking one. She was the firm's auditor, and she did her work diligently. Most of their meetings and conferences took place on Zoom. This went on till Victoria was 5. She was done with nursery and set for pre-high school education, which would cost much more tuition fees. Debbie's contract had just expired as it was 2 years already. Unfortunately, the firm was not ready to retain her. This had nothing to do with incompetence or unsatisfied service, but strictly the organization's rules. They hire auditors who come highly recommended every 2 years. They preferred to shuffle auditors because of 2 reasons. Their excuses were that they didn't want anyone feeling entitled to their company, a significant reason why they made their auditors work from home. Secondly, they understand the post is big and pays handsomely with just little work. They didn't want a single person to enjoy the benefits of that. Hence, they instead shuffle among certified auditors. The reasons seemed lame to Debbie, but there was nothing she could do about it. They owned their company after all, and were free to do what they deemed best. Before the contract expired, Debbie was able to buy a car with the hope of paying up installments, since she had other things to sort. She was to pay on an agreed date until she could complete the payment and gain full car ownership. Meanwhile, failure to pay the money for each month in 3 consecutive months would result in losing the vehicle. She was back to job hunting. She was back in the labor market. She spoke with a friend who told her about a conceded vacancy at a profound company in town after months of intense job searching. The interview was restricted to recommendations. You won't secure a job with the company if you do not come highly recommended. The company only interviewed prospects and potential employees on weekends, Saturday to be precise. That was weird too, but all of that didn't matter. All she hoped for was to get a job to meet up with her outstanding bills. She had to go with Victoria because it was a weekend, and she didn't want to leave her home alone. When she got to the company, she met up with the interviewer. He looked well-suited and composed. He didn't bother questioning her about her personal life or why she had decided to bring her daughter to her interview. He asked professional questions only. Debbie ensured to give the best response to every statement. She was careful with her words, and she didn't want to be flawed to avoid excuses from the interview for not hiring her. The interviewer asked her why she thought she deserved the position. She went further to explain how she had been able to work with the big firm for 2 years with no negative remarks. The curious interviewer asked her, "If you were as good as you claimed, what was your name again?" "Miss Debbie, sir," she quickly chipped in. "Yes, Miss Debbie, if you were as good as you claimed, why did the previous organization you worked with sack you?" She smiled and managed to explain the nature of the work as it was based on a contract after a brief detailed explanation. The interviewer nodded in satisfaction. He looked impressed. However, he told Debbie he wished he could help, but the position vacant was not for an auditor, which was Debbie's specialization, and he was sorry that the company would not be able to employ her. Debbie tried convincing him to change his mind. She explained how desperate she needed the job. She pointed at Victoria, sitting innocently playing with toys. She promised to take some personal and virtual classes and even seminars to understand what she needed to do. She assumed she was going to work twice as much as she worked for her previous company. The interviewer told her he understood how Debbie felt more than Debbie had pointed out. He told her that his boss, the company's owner, had given them a stern warning not to hire or employ an amateur in a critical position. He said that he would try as much as possible to help Debbie by linking her up with his aunt, who owned a company that needed an auditor, and hopefully she would get the job. He told Debbie to drop her contact, and should there be a development, after informing his aunt if she agrees to fix up an appointment, he will put a call through to Debbie. Debbie thanked him for being thoughtful to help, for his compassion, even though he didn't know her from Adam. She called out to Victoria as they made their way out of the interviewer's office. The interviewer waved at Victoria, and she waved back with a bright smile. "What a beautiful kid," the interviewer commented. As they left, they approached where Debbie had parked her car. Surprisingly, she saw a young man trying to lock her car tires. She anxiously questioned the young man's act. The man ignored her questions and instead replied to her with another question. "Aren't you Miss Debbie Pax?" Debbie's eyebrows raised a bit after hearing this. "This person must know me," she thought within herself as she managed to answer the question. The man introduced himself as a worker from the company where Debbie got her car with the agreement to pay on installment. He claimed that he had been directed to forelock the car as Debbie had refused to pay her installment for 3 consecutive months, which was the company's rule that she signed and agreed to. Debbie tried pleading with the young man, but he explained that his hands were tied as he was only deployed for a purpose he had to do. While at that, Victoria sighted a wallet that was some meters away. She tapped her mom to inform her, but Debbie was engrossed in what the young man was doing to his car and didn't concentrate on Victoria. Victoria walked down to where the wallet was lying and picked it up. Miraculously, she found well-stacked cash notes in the wallet. She took it and ran back to her mom to show her what she had just seen. The young man had left. Debbie was shocked at the money Victoria had found in the wallet. She counted it, and it was around $5,000. Victoria asked if that was enough to repossess her car, and she answered yes. Victoria advised that she pay them and get her car back. Debbie, however, lectured that taking someone else's property, regardless of how big or small, shouldn't be taken without the person's consent. She assured me that she would not touch the money but return to the company she had just left. Turning back, She found a small piece of paper in the wallet conveying the address and phone number of the wallet's owner. She concluded to call the number and afterward locate the address. She spoke with the man who directed her to the address in the wallet. Debbie headed to the place with Victoria. On getting there, they met a man who seemed to be in his middle 40s. Debbie asked if he was the one he was talking to over the phone, and he confirmed it. While Debbie was about to explain how her young girl came across the wallet, the man cut her short, introducing himself to her. In his words, he said, "My name is Dan Rock. I am the CEO of the popular The Rock Group of companies." Debbie was wowed. She had always heard about the brand, but never knew what the CEO looked like. At this point, her attention had grown and her curiosity to 100%. Dan Rock continued, "Every year, I do a social experiment, and this is what I do. I dropped my wallet, stacked up with cash in my wallet with an address to reach when eventually found. I have been doing this for the past 15 years, and I'm glad to tell you that you are the first person to call me." At this moment, Debbie was lost for words. All that came out of her mouth were repeated wows as she tried to comprehend the revelation. Dan Rock told Debbie that she had made him believe that there are still great and honest people on Earth. He said to her that the money in the wallet belonged to her, and that wasn't all. He told her the house they were in, which he added in the address in the wallet, was one of his houses, and if Debbie loved it, the house would become hers henceforth. Debbie couldn't believe her ears. She thought it was all a prank and cautioned Dan Rock to stop pulling her leg. But Dan Rock couldn't be more serious, as he told her he was serious. Victoria jumped and hugged Dan Rock as she appreciated him and told him they loved the house. Debbie was teary at this point, and she thanked Dan Rock continuously as she still found it hard to comprehend what had just happened. Dan Rock instead expressed his gratitude to Debbie for being honest and not being like the rest. He left afterward. While Debbie and Victoria were still thanking God for the marvelous thing he had just done, a strange call came in. It was the interviewer. He called to inform Debbie that he had spoken with his aunt and she would love to meet her. They fixed an appointment for the following week. Debbie was able to secure the job. She repossessed her car alongside, and she was able to enroll her daughter in the school of her choice. Indeed, honesty pays more than wages. It is not something we prepare for because you don't know when it will pave the way for you. The best thing is to learn to be honest naturally and not pretend to be honest. Our honesty can also be tested, just like Debbie's case. The wallet came when she needed help with her car. What could be more tempting? Many would mistake that for God's blessings. Honesty is a great virtue, and everyone should have it. It has a significant role in changing our world and making it more habitable. The question now is, will you be honest like Debbie? You should. It will help our planet.
The bright-eyed little girl ran along the shore. Her mother died in childbirth, and her father was responsible for her upbringing. The tall, lean man was hard on the girl. They lived in the old den. The wooden hut somehow held the heat from each crack that blew cold sea air. The man worked as a guard on the lighthouse. His task was to turn on the lantern for lost ships. She saved people's lives from the seamouth. The girl grew up on her own. Mary did not keep her company telling her stories. She was like a wild reed craving companionship. Her father restricted her from civilization. There was nothing in the house but a wooden table, a couple of chairs, and a bed. Once a week, Mike, her father's name, went shopping. Their diet consisted of black bread, macaroni, and some croup. They were supplied with fish by the sea. These days, the baby was left on the island all alone. "Oh, that's beautiful." She opened the electric board, said the little rascal. Dad was gone. He was late. Mary thought Dad was lost at sea and maybe he needed help. "For Dad to find me, I need to turn on the lantern on the lighthouse. He will see and will come home." Thin baby hands reached into thick electrical wires. She was saving her dad. Before she could get the cable, there was a bang, and many tiny sparks shone across her face. Ow! It hurt so much. Trying to cover her face with her hands, she fell on the cold, damp ground. A couple of hours later, her father moored to the shore. He didn't see the blonde girl running. He suspected something was wrong. The father's heart was popping out of his chest. Out of breath, the father's heart was popping out of his chest. Out of breath, he ran to the house, but no one was there. After looking through all the daughter's favorite places, he did not find her. There was only one place, the lighthouse. The lighthouse door was open. "Dad, where are you?" Mary's voice was barely heard. "Mary, my daughter, what happened?" the lighthouse keeper shouted. The little girl was lying there with no sign of life. Massive tears were coming out of her eyes. Her father raised his daughter with shaking hands. His daughter had an accident. Mike dragged her outside. "Dad, why is it so dark?" Father looked at his only daughter with horror. The light was shining in the yard. His lips trembled. "So now is the night." The desperate father answered, choking in his tears. She went blind. All life was divided, before and after. Now she had to learn to live in a new way. It had to be a clean slate. He wondered how to explain to poor Mary that she would never see sunlight. How did the seasons change? The 7-year-old girl continued to lie in the man's hands. The father fell to his knees. Pressing his daughter, he wept with all his might. "God, why are you punishing me like this?" He turned to the sky. "You took my wife, and now you want to deprive my daughter of me?" Poor Mike. With the last strength in his fist, he carried his daughter into the house. "Honey, now we have to learn to live in a new way." Tears continued to flow from Mary's eyes. Then she understood the situation. Her childhood world was immersed in eternal darkness. Lying there for a couple of days, she tried to get up. Her white feet stood on a cold wooden floor. She fell a couple of steps. Fear, mistrust, and confusion stopped her. It was a cold, harsh winter. The girl was growing up. Her father tried to breathe life into Mary, but she felt nothing. Her eyes were always cold. She tried to see something, closed her eye, and she squinted all the time, but the result was not there. Having reached the age of 18, the father decided to put his daughter in a specialized boarding school. There were children with various defects, as their parents called them. Mary cried and did not want to let go of her father. After all, she had no mother. She was afraid of losing the one person she knew. The teachers at school were strict. The children were very violent. These children never saw the faces of their natural parents. Their parents had long since abandoned them. They had written them out of their lives. They had not loved Mary since the first day. She was too bright. She was always fighting for justice, defending her point of view. She was trying to survive in a violent environment. Her only consolation was her friend Emma. The girls quickly hit it off. Emma saw but could not hear. She was her eyes. The girls spent all their time together. Emma talked about everything around them, and Mary painted in her imagination the bright world in which she lived. It did not last long. Emma was soon adopted. Mary felt abandoned and forgotten. Mike visited his daughter very rarely. He tried to find a good job and ran to the doctors hoping that at least someone could help him regain his daughter's sight. Everyone had their hands up and refused him. She spent 10 years in this horrible place. Mike took her home after graduating. The lighthouse has been recognized as a local attraction for all these years of absence. Crowds of tourists began to visit the island. But even this did not save the financial situation of the family. It is worth noting that she acquired a unique ability with the loss of vision. She sang very beautifully. She sang songs every time she walked in the open air. She remembered and knew every hillock. Twisting her memories from childhood, she was afraid to forget the brightest moments. As she walked, she hummed her new song. Her eyes were full of tears. She constantly cried as she sang. On that day, another group of visitors arrived on the island. The guide Lively kept the historical story about the old lighthouse. Tourists listened to him very carefully. Among them were two guys. These were young sailors who had just returned from a long voyage. JC, the blonde-haired guy, was different from his friend. JC's friend was too frivolous. At that moment, she was sitting on the hill. The wind was playing in her long, thick hair. Her gaze was drawn further away, trying to see something. JC fell in love with Mary at first sight. He didn't know the girl was blind. He snuck up and tried to capture her on his camera. Hearing the camera click, the girl hurried away. She was avoiding people. But the persistent young man found the right words to win the young lady over to him. Looking into her eyes, he saw the emptiness and despair. Mary looked at his face with her hands. Her long fingers glided over his face. She tried not to miss the features of his face. As she spent her evenings talking, she fell in love with a boy. No one cared or cared more about her than would live without him. His health deteriorated. He had terminal cancer. A terrible cough with blood kept torturing him. Frequent fainting spells prevented his daughter from having a happy life. He left his little girl in the hands of a violent world. Learning that Mary could regain her sight with expensive surgery, JC went to his beloved father. Her father listened to him and said he could not collect such money, and there was no one to lend. He did not have such an amount. JC wanted Mary to start seeing him. JC's crime was the only way to get Mary's sight back. He committed the robbery and secretly sent all the money to the clinic where the surgery was due. That evening was the last time Mary heard the voice of her loved one. JC was forced to resort to deception. He told her that he needed to go on a long sail. The girl's heart trembled. Everyone she loved so much refused her, but she knew he wouldn't be happy with a blind woman. After the act, the boy surrendered to the local police and was given 5 years in prison as punishment. Mary underwent an operation, after which she regained her sight. Meanwhile, the girl learned that she was pregnant. She would have a son. Her father soon died. Now she was alone in this vast world. She gave birth to a son and did not stop waiting for her lover. All day she walked, looking into the faces. She was looking for him, her boyfriend. It was hard to imagine him. She never saw him, only felt his body. She named her son Robert. She came to live on the island alone with her child. It was difficult for her to feed the child at the same time and provide for her financially. In such a limbo, she could not take care of the child. Robert was restless, constantly crying. There was no help. One day, having gathered her son, Mary went to the nearest grocery store. Leaving her son on the street, she tried to leave in a hurry, but the loud cry of her child stopped her. God, what am I doing? She went back to her son. With the child, she wandered the dark streets all night. There was a real war inside her head. She understood that the child was from her lover, which was the fruit of their true love. It was tough for her to live on. She ran out of money. One day, she decided to take her own life. She stepped up the highway with trembling hands and tears in her eyes, suffocating with tears. The sparkle of the headlights blinded her. One car braked sharply in front of her. The driver got out of the vehicle and began shouting at her. She stood, petrified, her son bursting with tears. The man grabbed her and the child and put them in the car and drove them home. He was shocked to see the state of their home and poverty they were living in. He understood what the girl was running from. He understood why she wanted to kill herself and her child. I'm so tired of living. These problems are constantly weighing on my shoulders." She talked and cried at the same time. Sam, the name of her savior, promised to help her. It was painful for him to watch as a young mother struggled to survive in this vast world. The difficulty was that she had never met her lover. In her memories, there was only a voice and image that she imagined for herself. Maybe there was no such person. The man understood the longer he stayed with her, the more he liked her. Mary was ready to take the courtship of a new guy. But one day, she saw her picture in Sam's folder. It was her very first picture. It was me. She froze. Under a pile of papers, she found a guy who was accused of stealing. After learning about the boy's prison, she hurried to see him. She wanted the truth. She did not expect to see her lover as she walked along a dark, damp-soaked corridor. An iron door opened, and she entered the meeting room. She had to wait a few minutes and felt like her whole life was flashing before her eyes. The door opened, but she hesitated to turn. A man's trembling voice called out to her, "Mary!" Hearing his voice, she fell unconscious. She came to her senses and said, "It's that voice. It's him. I found you." After talking to JC, she returned home. Sam sat there as if nothing was happening. Then she realized that Sam was deliberately hiding all the information. He decided to take JC's place, but Mary continued to be calm. Her lover had 6 months to wait before he went to prison. Then they could start over and raise the boy. Sam tried his best to extend JC's sentence, and his goal was to get rid of JC forever, but fate told him otherwise. Mary miraculously learned of Sam's treacherous plan. He tried to deceptively marry the girl, to take away the hut that was in the lighthouse. 3 months had passed. JC was out of prison. During that time, Mary lived in a hut near the lighthouse. Another sleepless night passed. One morning, her son woke up and ran to pick up the seashells after the storm. "Mom," said the child's voice. The woman shuddered. Sam stood on the shore and looked at them with a smile. Mary screamed and ran to kiss her lover. Within a week, they found the right words and explained to Robert that they now had a fully fledged family. "Was your dad?" She said nothing with tears in her eyes. But there was one unfinished business. It was Sam. Mary told about the schemes of the cunning man. JC decided to seek help from the relevant authorities. When he arrived there, he met a friend with whom he went on the same excursion where he saw Mary and lost his mind a few years ago. His friend listened to his story. He promised to help. Soon Sam's frauds were exposed, and the man was imprisoned. The happy family decided to sell all the property and leave the island. With the money they received, they bought a house where they raised their children in perfect harmony. The sun invaded the bedroom with its golden rays and reflected on Margaret's hair. Grayson held a tray in his hands. He walked carefully into the room. When he noticed his wife was still fast asleep, he stared at her blonde hair that radiated under the sun's rays. Her beautiful lashes were long and thick. Her lips were full and had a strawberry tint. He stood at the door still for more than 60 seconds, watched her without blinking. Finally, he entered the room and set the tray aside. He pecked her cheeks and she didn't even budge. Soon he deepened the kiss, and his ragged breath was the catalyst that woke her up. All along, she thought she was dreaming, yet the man was on her bed kissing her. She tried to push him away, but Grayson's muscular arms didn't bulge. He pried her lips open and inserted her tongue. Her mouth tasted a bit sour, but he loved it. Margaret bit his tongue, but he endured the pain. He slowly raised the duvet on her body, carefully climbed on the bed, and then pressed her while she tried to free herself. Soon Margaret stopped trying to push her husband away and started to move to meet his gentle yet intense thrust. Her moaning filled the room with warmth. It was like a melody to Grayson's ears. Grayson and Margaret had been married for 2.5 years, Yet every day still felt like the first time he set eyes on her. Some years ago, a woman bashed into his car while trying to reverse. Other women would have stepped down from their car and apologized for their mistake, but Margaret did not. "Why is your car parked here?" Grayson felt his ears go red. The overdressed woman had bashed his car and was trying to push the blame on him. Grayson gouged her dress from head to toe and immediately knew she was one of those women trying to climb into his bed. He shook his head and looked at her with determination because he would teach her a lesson. He laughed dryly and said, "You think this lame joke of yours will get you into my bed? You must be dumb then." "How dare you call me dumb?" Grayson sneered in his heart. He had seen countless women pretending to get close to him. "There's no way I will let you go unless you fix my car. I know you hit me on purpose. I've seen almost every girl throw hints at me, but none had dared to hit my car." "Who the hell do you think you are? Boston women might be head over heels for you, but certainly not me. You certainly aren't my type, and I don't even know you. Fuck off." She yanked her hand from his wrist. She walked to her car and threw roughly $1,000 at him. "There you go, broke boy. Fix your car." Grayson was shocked at how everything played out. Before he could get to his senses, Margaret entered her car and zoomed off. The following day, Grayson was on the headline again, but the headlines were different. "Woman throws money at Boston's most eligible suitor." "Billionaire, Grayson forces woman to pay for car damages." "Petty Grayson. Grayson forces woman to pay for car damage." The headlines were pretty outrageous. Margaret was in her office when her secretary informed her that the press had requested her. The media escalated the story and kept following her around. Eventually, she lost her job due to the pressmen's constant disruption at her place of work. For months, Margaret was forced to fake a relationship with Grayson for the media. Soon, it blossomed into a fully fledged love story. The couple stood up from the bed. Grayson carried Margaret into the bathroom. He cleaned her up in the bathroom, and while doing so, he felt heat rise in his body. Lately, Margaret had been punishing him sexually. Today, he was determined to make the most out of it. However, she felt something poke her. She demanded the sponge, but Grayson refused to hand it over. Soon, they started dragging the sponge. By the time Margaret decided to let go of the sponge, Grayson wasn't expecting it, so he lost his balance and fell. She tried to assist him and discovered that he was bleeding. She called for an ambulance, and he was rushed to hospital. At the hospital, Grayson's mom, Patricia, showed up. She looked at Margaret disdainfully. She never liked her from the day they met. She believes Mag's nagging would be the death of her son. She asked security to throw Mag out of the hospital and proceeded to take care of her son. In a few hours, Grayson woke up to find his mom by his bed. "Where's Maggie? You almost lost your life and all you can think of is Maggie? What's so good about her?" "Mom, it was a minor cut. I slipped while bathing." "You are trying to cover up that bitch. You've stayed in that house for years and never had an accident that required stitches. Your lawyer is standing outside. He has divorce papers with him. Sign it and move on with your life. Let's pay her off, then you can get married to Natasha." Grayson glared at his mom and removed the IV drip from his hands. The security men outside did not dare block his path when they saw him angry. "What are you doing? Grab him now," Patricia ordered the security men. Grayson was moving around the underground parking lot, hoping Maggie was still waiting around. A white Rolls-Royce parked before him. A frail-looking girl wearing a gown that showed her curves alighted the car. "Hello, Grayson. What do you want? Why do you keep acting like we are enemies? We grew up together, yet you never saw me as a woman." "Well, Natasha, I'm a married man." Maggie, who had been in the car waiting, decided to walk around the parking lot. When she alighted from the vehicle, she saw the most outrageous scene in her life. She saw Natasha move close to Grayson, and he didn't shove her away. Natasha wrapped her arms around Grayson's shoulders and whispered, "Your wife is a gold digger. If we offer her some money, she will leave. I truly love you." From Margaret's end, it seemed as though they were kissing. And before Grayson could reply to Natasha, Maggie was already behind the duo. Grayson suddenly pushed Natasha, and she fell. Why did you push her? Weren't you enjoying a steamy session with your lover? They heard a resounding clap from behind, which was coming from Patricia. Finally, she knows. Signing the divorce papers shouldn't be a problem now. How dare you? Maggie was furious and attempted to pounce on Patricia. Grayson held her back and kept fighting to free her from his grip. Get your cheating hands off me, Grayson. He didn't budge and carried her into the car. Grayson, tell me the truth and nothing but the truth now. I would never leave you. I wedded you in the cathedral and said my vows before God and man, that I would stick with you till death do us part. Trust me. Grayson, the lawyer, was there, and you kissed Natasha. My mom bought in the lawyer. She wanted me to sign the papers. Natasha was telling me to offer you money because she believes you are just with me for the money. We didn't kiss. She just suddenly held my shoulder and leaned close. Maggie laughed hysterically. You must think I'm an idiot. Stop the car now. No. She reached out for the wheel, and the car swept left and right as they both fought to control the wheel. When Grayson lifted his face to look at the road, the car ran into a truck. He knew if he suddenly stepped on the brake, the vehicle would somersault. He grabbed Margaret in his arms to shield her just before the car rammed into the truck. Margaret heard the blaring sound of both car horns before she became unconscious. Margaret had a few bruises. She didn't wake up until 1 week later because she was in shock. The smell of disinfectant invaded her nose and appalled her. Images of the accident flooded her mind. She remembered her husband had shielded her before the crash. She removed the IV and got out of bed. At the hospital reception, she heard the broadcaster mention the burial of a particular business mogul, Grayson Humphrey. Her eyes widened in shock. She quickly hailed a taxi to St. Mary's Cathedral. On her way, she kept praying the news shouldn't be true. When she entered the church, she saw Patricia paying her last respect. Immediately, both women saw each other and they froze. Mag ran to the coffin and collapsed before it. On the other hand, Patricia felt angry seeing the daughter-in-law she was dissatisfied with. Wench, I told my son he would be the end of you. Yet he didn't listen. It would help if you were satisfied since he is dead. Somebody kick her out of this place. Patricia yelled at Margaret. Margaret went back home devastated. Everything in their home was just as they had left it. The breakfast Grayson served was still lying on the table. His clothes were everywhere. She felt his warm hands caress her abdomen and whispered, "Let's make." She tried to hold those hands, but they were not there. She cried profusely until she fell asleep. It's been 2 weeks since Grayson's burial. When she noticed she was running out of food, she managed to visit the shopping mall, only to discover all the cards Grayson had given had been blocked. She knew Patricia was behind it. For a week plus, all she did was cry herself to sleep, eat chocolate, drink water, then cry again. She had no clue where her life was currently headed. She knew she had become a poor widow, with just a house filled with memories of her husband. "Gray, can you get me some chocolates?" she asked from her sleep. And when she woke up, she discovered she was dreaming about him again. She walked into the kitchen to pick up some chocolates and found she had exhausted them. Inside the jar, she saw an envelope. She had never picked her chocolates before. Gray's duty had always been, and he performed the task excellently. She tore the envelope and found a letter in it. It was a letter from Grayson. It read, "Dear Maggie, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to watch you curl up and sleep. I love you, and that won't change. Maggie, if you found this envelope, I'm no longer by your side. You never get a bar of chocolate yourself since we got married. Whenever I take a bar of chocolate from the jar, I pray to God that you never get chocolates yourself one day. My mom would always say, Margaret will be your end. Maggie, in your stead, will I happily die over and over again. I shield you from the world. I'd stand against nations and anyone who dares to speak hate of you. My feelings for you are unexplainable. Even now, I long to caress you. You hate me when I'm clingy, but it was the only way I thought of showing you how much you mean to me. I was too afraid to lose even a nanosecond away from you. My promise to you is, in another world, I'd be waiting to have you again as my lawfully wedded, beautiful, and nagging wife. My love for you is unconditional and never-ending. You are the brightness in my life and the meaning behind my smile. I hope I was able to prove how much I love you. P.S. Check the envelope and you'd find another paper. Take it to the bank and you'd be paid monthly for as long as you live. Your loving and daring husband. At this point, Margaret broke down in tears. She realized how she had cheated herself. She knew deep down she spent all her time with Grayson, whining about petty things rather than enjoying and living in the moment. Death, how cruel are you? Grayson, what will I do with all of the money when you are not here? It was getting late now. Josh and Emma were late and drunk, supported by his arm while he carried her heels in the other hand. He hoped he could avoid the fight about him being late because he was so drunk that they could only go home and sleep. Emma, could you sit somewhere while I order a taxi? He murmured. No, I'll take the car, Emma slurred. But Em, we're drunk out of... Do you want to add to my humiliation of showing up alone by making me take a taxi? Look, I will call an Uber X, Josh offered. She slipped her hand inside his pocket and pulled out the valet card. I will drive, she stated. Josh got into the car, tipping the valet and thanking him. Emma hit the accelerator and the car sped through the road. Emma, please slow down, Josh almost screamed. Josh looked out the windshield. The trees at the side of the road were rushing towards them. He heard the brakes screeching. The car freed itself and the smell of disc brakes. Josh pulled the handbrake. The car hurled towards the trees and flipped. Moments flashed before him. He remembered the petals strewn across the bedroom floor in anticipation of Emma. Candles lit. He saw the candid number 2 and 7 being blown out. Emma putting a slice of cake in his mouth. His print of Emma's face with coded numbers. Then the pain hit him, and the world turned dark. Josh opened his eyes. His head was numb, his eyes stung, and his body felt like he had been thrown down a mountain. Emma loomed into his vision. Are you okay? Josh croaked. Emma's eyes were puffy. Her skin was sallow. Josh, honey, thank goodness. Emma kissed his forehead. What happened? Josh sighed. We were in an accident. You pulled the handbrake and the car flipped. You hit your head. But you're all right, babe? I'm fine. Minor scratches. She was breathless. They were interrupted. Hi, Josh. I'm Dr. Norman. How are you feeling? A dark man with graying temples and a stethoscope around his neck greeted Josh. As good as I could be, Josh smiled. Well, I have some bad news. The doctor shook his head. Josh sought Emma's hand. You have a spinal injury. You are suffering from post-trauma amnesia. You hit your head. I am sure we can get somewhere with therapy, but medically, I'm sorry, I cannot help you. Dr. Norman lowered his eyes. Josh clasped Emma's hand tighter. I am sure we will get through it, he said, glancing in Emma's way. They came home. Sophia, Josh's housekeeper, greeted them. He could not remember anyone except Emma. Mr. Josh, I'm sorry. I did not know whether to let your bedroom. I cleaned it, but let the candles remain, she stammered. Josh looked at her wide-eyed. Josh, this is Sophia. She is your housekeeper. Sophia, please carry inside all the bouquets. Set them in vases, Emma ordered. Over the next few weeks, Josh's life took a new schedule. He lay in bed watching television. Sophia catered to his daily needs. Emma dropped in after work. They ate and watched television, after which Emma left. In Emma's absence, Josh saw flashes of what he thought was his previous life. Large computers and men are calling out to him. And two faces, a man and a woman. Josh saw himself laughing with them, not knowing who they were. Josh feared he would forget Emma too. On weekends, Emma and Josh went out into the city. He would ask about those flashes, the computers. He owned them. They now had to be sold for treatment. The man and the woman, his friends. Picnics ended with a stop at the doctor's office. Soon Josh handed his credit card to Emma. Josh noted that Emma turned morose each day. Her eyes sank, refusing to meet his gaze. Josh held her hand as they sat together a month after the crash. "Em, what is disturbing you so much?" he asked. I am the reason you're, in this mess," she stammered. "It was a bad judgment call, babe. It could have been anyone." Josh kissed her hand. Slowly, the guilt lifted itself from her shoulders. As Emma paid for drinks with Josh's card, she told her friends it was Josh's fault. The car would not have flipped if he had not pulled the handbrake. Daniel and Iris had visited the hospital only once. After Emma's claims, they too maintained their distance. 2 months down the lane, Emma dropped the bombshell on him as they sat together. "Josh, I got an offer from a chain of hotels for the concierge. I will have to leave the state," she exclaimed. "But I need you," he murmured. "Look, I have to make it work, but what, Em? My clearest memory is that of you, and you are my only link to the outside world. Josh, I have to look forward. If I stay with you, I will have to support both of us. It is too much, and with your medical bills piling up, you cannot afford to pay for it. None of it, much less my lifestyle. Em, don't leave me, please. We will make it work. I will try harder in therapy," Josh cried. "I'm sorry, love. I hope we can remain friends. Also, doing long-distance work is too hard for me." "Please don't. You are all I have of my past life," Josh mumbled. Emma kissed him and pulled away quickly. You will make it through," she spoke. Emma left that night. The entire night, pre- and post-accident memories of Emma and him flooded his mind. Josh tried to log on his Facebook to connect with friends and his Instagram, but he had forgotten all his passwords. Josh lay in bed agonizing. In the morning, he woke to Sophia screaming. He rushed out and saw her wrinkled skin laced with tears. "Mr. Josh, I promised I did not take anything. I promised," she hiccuped. His table, lined with iPads and Macs, was empty. The last blow Emma had delivered. Josh calmed Sophia down and went to his room, feeling empty and hopeless. Josh sank into depression as his days bled into nights and days again. Josh saw Sophia as a constant presence. She cooked him her native Colombian delicacies, talked to him, and told him about the life she saw him live, his office and his colleagues. She told him about the investments he would go big, but could not tell him what it was. Soon they became close friends. One day, Sophia came at her usual time. "Mr. Josh, I am old. I should go back to my village." Tears rolled down Josh's face, imagining his horrible loneliness. "No, please listen. Mr. Josh, you come with me. I will take you to my village. The air is pure and it is green. Better than sitting in a room all day." Her reasoning sealed the deal. Josh arrived in Kutape, where he was given a warm welcome by many of Sophia's children and grandchildren. They gathered around him, serving him various delicious concoctions that Sophia promised would heal him. He felt the warmth of generosity flow through him. The days morphed into long walks, hikes, and delicious foods brought over by the villagers. Josh roamed the countryside, and when he forgot his way, a villager would guide him to Sophia's hut. sometimes leaving their work to drive him there. At night, Sophia burnt candles, her murmured prayers reaching Josh's ears. And in those moments, Josh felt a wave of affection for her. Sophia talked to Josh, teaching him words and asking him about the small things that confused her in New York. Josh answered as best he could, given the state of his memory, which he felt had improved. He would now remember Daniel and Iris, and as he was vexed at their abandonment and betrayal, he compared their abandonment with the generosity of the people in the village. About 6 months after arriving in Guatape, Sophia's grandson showed him his phone. "Look, my Facebook," he said. A memory of clicking keyboard keys hit him. The task he had repeated several times, sometimes twice a day. Josh took the phone and punched his email and password into Facebook. He was in. After months, he was in. Gratitude washed over Josh, and to show it, he searched for the pictures Sophia's grandson had taken of the two of them over the months. He selected a few. "I was in an accident that made me lose my memory. My friends, Daniel, Iris, and my girlfriend Emma abandoned me at this time. I was taken to Colombia by Sophia, who nursed me to health. While I have lost all to my name, courtesy of Emma, I want to thank everyone who abandoned me. I now know true friendship and true humanity." He clicked the post. Over the next 3 days, a storm of media hit him. He was called on news channels, local and international, to tell his story. A plethora of journalists were interviewing him. Words of comfort and solidarity flooded his inbox. In this flurry of activity, he looked at Emma's comment under his post. "Things are not what they always look like. I needed to move on. It was too much. However, I took everything but the USB locket." It hit him then. Josh had spent an entire night mining bitcoins for Emma's birthday. When he had presented it to her, she tossed it aside. 10,000 bitcoins. That is like 2 pizzas, said Josh. Josh had kept it. While cleaning one day, Sophia fished it out from under a sofa. He told her to hold on to it. Josh rushed to Sophia and asked if she had it. "Of course. You said it could be something big." She got up and looked inside the suitcase that contained everything she had brought back. Josh sat Sophia and her grandchildren around him over dinner, and as they plugged it in, Josh found 10,000 bitcoins glaring back at him. He added another post to Facebook. "Thank you for the reminder, Emma. I found the bitcoins. You tossed $1 million aside." In an hour, his inbox was flooded with messages, invites to parties, invite to Daniel and Iris's wedding, and Emma sent him a video too. She sat in her New York apartment, cheek on her palm. "Josh, I always knew you would become something. You were like a phoenix rising out of your ashes. I have always loved you and will always love you. We belong together, and I promise to stand by you through thick and thin. I am the only person who has loved you enough to let you go and seek your inner strength. Come back to me, darling," she was saying in the video. "Emma, you did not let me go. You let me drown while you cruised away to a better life. You left me depressed, broke, and helpless. You and everyone else. I am not going back to where I was," Josh texted back. "Josh, you will regret this. I regretted my previous choices. Now I am correcting those mistakes. Goodbye, Emma." He blocked Emma. In the subsequent days, Josh explained to Sophia's children what a Bitcoin was. As he informed them that he would transfer half of it to them for bringing him into the folds of their generosity. "But Mr. Josh, we did not do it for the money," Sophia exclaimed when he was done explaining. "And I could never repay your kindness or friendship, but I mined these in the name of love. And now you are all the people I love. Please take it," he explained. With the remaining half, Josh bought land for a home and a school right in Guatape, with the help of Sophia's family, intending to teach the children the meaning of life, vision, and the technical knowledge that had helped him. Over the next few months, Josh went around collecting funds for his school, declining each social gathering in favor of remaining in the village and working towards building his school and home. As the school was inaugurated, he named it after Sophia, the Enlightened One. Over the years, Sophia's School of Life Sciences produced many respected alums who would go forth to establish tech companies, their minds wary of gold diggers and always looking for the kindest, gentlest souls. It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up. A shallow voice spoke inside his head. It was a bright Saturday morning. The birds were chirping in the skies, filling up the airwaves with their melodious songs as they flew happily in circles. Alex woke up a little bit later than usual, especially considering that it was a Sunday, his favorite day. Alex always looked forward to Sundays. Because he could have the most fun out of all the days of the week. He sat upright on his bed, struggling to keep his eyes wide open. He must have had one hell of a night. His eyelids were heavy, as if they were loaded with tiny bags of cement. Alex lazily lifted his right hand and rubbed his eyes, slowly looking from right to left. To his bedside desk, picking up his glasses and putting them on. Everything now looked crisper, and a smile lit up his face as he imagined all the fun activities that awaited him. "Mom, I'm up," Alex shouted in a happy tone, calling out to his mother, Lorraine, who was already turning the corner into his bedroom. "Hello, my sunshine. How was your morning?" She responded with a beaming smile as she walked into the room. She was just as excited as he was. Lorraine loved her son more than anything else in her life. "I am good, Mom. How are you doing?" Alex asked, genuinely curious to know. The two of them exchanged greetings before Alex finally raised his arms like he usually did, and without any questions, his mom Lorraine knew what it meant. She went over to the corner of the room, grabbed his wheelchair, and brought it closer to the bed, before helping her son get on top of it. Alex had cerebral palsy, a condition that left him confined to a wheelchair for the better part of his life. He lived through this disability with the help of his mother. After a delicious breakfast, the two left the house at around 10 a.m., their day already planned. First, they would go to the nearby playground, where Alex would meet up with a few of his friends and play. They would then leave for lunch later in the day to his favorite restaurant, a locally owned restaurant serving the best wings in town. Before capping off the day at the theaters, everything seemed perfect, and they were beyond excited. To his surprise, Alex was the first to arrive, but his friends came a few minutes later. The next couple of hours went well, and all the kids had the time of their lives. They played on the swings, and they played with their ball, just being kids. But as we know, all good things must come to an end. "Excuse me, do you kids live here?" an anonymous woman asked. At first, the kids continued playing and having fun, oblivious to the fact that she was speaking to them. But when she asked for the second time, they had to turn around and see what she wanted. "Hey, how may I help you?" Ian, one of Alex's friends, asked. Ian was also a disabled kid. He suffered from rickets at an early age, and as a result, he had bow-legged feet. "Do you know that this playground is reserved only for residents of this apartment right across the street? Huh? Who permitted you to play here? Do you have any adults with you that I can speak to?" the rude lady asked. By that point, all of them knew what she was going on. The lady was called Karen. She was a Caucasian female, probably in her late 30s or mid-40s. She was far from appealing to look at, and her character only worsened things. From the way she spoke, it was clear that she had zero respect for the innocent children who were trying to have a good time. And she viewed them as lesser beings, all of them beneath her, like she was some goddess whose words were to be taken as the golden rule. "Hello, is everything okay here, Alex?" Lorraine asked, having moved closer when she saw the commotion. "Are you the parent to these strange kids?" the rude woman asked. "Strange? What do you mean by that?" "Yes, I am in charge of these children, and they are not harming anybody. They are just a bunch of kids trying to play and have a great time. Leave them alone, please." Lorraine responded after a short silence. She was clearly shaken by the harsh words that had come out of that woman's foul mouth, but nothing could prepare her for what she would hear next. "You have to leave right now. This playground is reserved for residents of this apartment building only. This playground is for normal kids, not those. My child has been peeping through the window all morning, scared to come out and play because of your kids. So please do me a favor and find somewhere else to play. You know, somewhere you belong." The rude woman spoke. It was a tough pill to swallow. None of them could believe what had just gone through their ears. Lorraine stood perplexed to the ground. Her heart rate spiked. She could feel the anger and rage boiling within her, ready to burst out, and she clenched her fists tighter and harder, praying to the gods to give her the strength to act right in front of her son, to set an example that she would be proud of in the future. This was the first time Alex had seen his mom so angry and frustrated. But above all, she was devastated from within, and he could tell. He moved closer to his mom and held her hand, and immediately she felt better and more relaxed. Without speaking to the rude woman, Lorraine and her son bid goodbye to their friends, who were also leaving, and they all returned to their respective homes. That night, Lorraine struggled to get some sleep. She turned around in bed, crying until her eyes were red and sore. Every time she closed her eyes, she remembered the harsh words that had come from Karen's mouth, and it was like someone driving a sharp dagger right into her stomach, slowly turning it and ripping her guts to shreds. That is how bad and painful she felt. A train of thoughts ran through her mind. She asked herself why someone could be such a bitch, especially to little innocent children. She found herself cussing the whole night, trying to find peace. What did she do to deserve this? Had she done enough to protect her baby boy from the world and other people like that wretched witch? She asked herself these and more questions. It was hard to fathom how cold the earth could be, but eventually she made peace with herself, knowing that she had to be strong for her son. On the other hand, Alex was a little stung at the moment, but more than anything, he was pissed off. He wondered what he had done to deserve this treatment, but in the end, he remembered everything his mom had taught him. Over the coming weeks and months, the rude rich woman somehow discovered where Alex lived with his mom. She would pretend she was going out for a jog with her dogs and spend a little bit more time outside their house, peeping through their window, trying to see how they lived. She could not understand why what she termed an abomination lived so close to her. She could not believe that she shared social amenities with people that were way below her social and financial class. At first, Lorraine and Alex thought it was just a coincidence that they would see her so often after the incident. But soon they realized she was stalking them, even when they went to the stores to get some groceries. One evening, Lorraine decided to confront her to see why she was doing all the extra stuff, especially because she was so interested in her business. "Why are you doing all this? Why do you hate us so much? I do not think we have done anything to you ever before. My son and I do not even know who you are. You need to start minding your business, lady. Leave me and my son alone. Do you understand?" Lorraine said to her in the middle of the grocery store. The incident turned a couple of heads, but almost everyone seemed to agree with Lorraine. It was as if they knew how terrible of a human being the rich Caucasian woman was. Her bad behavior was not limited to Lorraine, but to everyone else she deemed lower than her. She would exhibit her snappy, repulsive character to the cashiers, janitors, and even disabled children. It was indeed a horrific sight. "What are you going to do about it, you peasant? Do not make me call the cops and sue you for harassment. And for the record, never talk to me again unless I speak to you first," the rude lady said, making a disrespectful clicking sound with her tongue, before walking out of the grocery store. She was the most arrogant and self-centered human being one could ever meet. "Mom, why do you think she hates us so much?" Alex asked his mom, genuinely interested to know why. He could not wrap his head around it. "I do not know, son. She has her problems. There are good and bad people in this world, and horrible people like her. I want you to promise me that you will always be respectful. Alex, I want you to promise me that you will set a good example for those around you. Can you do that for me, baby?" Lorraine asked Alex. "Yes, Mom, I promise. To be the best version of myself I can be," Alex responded. The two of them went on their shopping as usual before making their way home. As soon as Lorraine had finished unloading the groceries from the back of the car, she received a phone call and was informed that she was urgently needed back at the hospital. It was on a Saturday, one of her days off, but she cared about helping people. Lorraine quickly made her way to the hospital. She worked as a nurse. Upon arrival, she found that the atmosphere was hectic. Everything was moving so fast. And as per protocol, she knew it was most likely a gruesome accident. Lorraine quickly checked in and started helping out immediately, unloading the victims from the ambulances as they came in. Little did she know that the next victim she would see was someone that would hit so close to home. On one of the stretchers lay the lifeless body of the rude Karen, completely drenched in blood from the head to her thighs. Her legs had been entirely crushed in the accident that supposedly reduced her expensive car to a mangled wreck. She could feel a tear flowing down her cheek. She did not love the woman who had been rude and disrespectful to her and her son from the start, but even she could not wish that on her worst enemy. The doctors said that she had survived miraculously, but now she had to be amputated if she was to stay longer and make it out alive. It was hard to believe. That night, Lorraine explained to her son everything that had happened. 2 weeks later, the rude woman awoke from her coma. The doctors explained what had to be done for her to survive. She also found out that Lorraine was the nurse in charge of taking care of her. She could not believe it. She tried to scream, but her voice was lost. She watched in disbelief as tears of pain, bitterness, and regret flowed down her cheeks to her hospital gown. The moral of the story is you should never be a bitch, or life will punish you.